True crime. Bhari. The teenager behind Believe in Magic. The charity built around a promise. A teenager. A children's charity. And a story Britain wanted to believe. A bracelet could carry an entire promise. Believe in Magic used bright colors, fairy tale language, and small acts of attention to reach families whose lives had been reorganized by hospital appointments, uncertain test results, and the exhausting routine of serious childhood illness. A gift arriving at the right moment could matter. A party could interrupt months of fear. A trip could give a family one memory not defined by treatment. At the center of that promise is Bhari, a teenager presented as someone who understands those families from the inside. With her mother, Jean O'Brien, she creates a charity intended to grant wishes and bring moments of escape to children with serious or terminal conditions. The story is easy to embrace because it appears to join two powerful ideas: lived experience and selfless action. The first questions do not concern a courtroom or an official investigation. They concern ordinary details. Which hospital is involved? Which doctor has recommended the treatment? Why do descriptions of Megan's conditions seem to change? Why does an urgent appeal ask the public to move faster than the information supporting it? This is the story of how a charitable promise grew, how doubt entered a close online community, and how one apparently simple question opened into several far harder ones. What happened to the money? What was true about Megan's health? And who, ultimately, was Megan inside the story being told in her name? The life around Bhari. Megan is 16 when Believe in Magic becomes a registered charity in January 2012. Its formal purpose is straightforward: to relieve the needs of seriously or terminally ill children and young people, together with their families and carers. The public register later describes parties, wish weekends, hospital gifts, and dreams made real for more than 1,000 children. The charity's emotional authority rests partly on Megan's own reported experience. Her mother says Megan has been living with a brain tumor, and Megan is presented as a young person turning illness into service. That position gives her unusual credibility. She is not merely asking strangers to donate. She appears to understand the waiting rooms, the medication, the interrupted education, and the way an ill child can become the center of a family's daily logistics. Available accounts also describe a real history of headaches and a diagnosis of idiopathic intracranial hypertension, a condition involving raised pressure around the brain. At the beginning, however, the public story is simpler and more dramatic. Megan is seriously ill, yet spends her time making life brighter for other children. That simplicity is part of the appeal. Families dealing with childhood cancer or other severe conditions often meet online because few people outside that world understand its language or its rhythms. Believe in Magic enters that network not as a distant institution but as something personal. Megan and Jean are accessible. They respond to stories. They send gifts. They appear to notice individual children. The charity, therefore, becomes more than an organization. For some families, it feels like recognition, the people closest to the story. Jean O'Brien is not a background figure. She is Megan's mother, advocate, organizer, and the adult voice most closely associated with claims about Megan's health. The pair operate as a unit in public. Megan embodies the charity's purpose, while Jean communicates urgency, arranges support, and protects the account of her daughter's condition. Around them is a network of parents whose children are genuinely ill. These parents are not casual donors looking in from outside. They understand feeding tubes, scans, infections, treatment protocols, overseas consultations, and the emotional cost of hope. That experience initially makes Believe in Magic valuable. It will also make some parents unusually sensitive to details that do not sound medically or practically right. The charity's profile expands through celebrity support. Members of One Direction promote the cause, wear its wristbands, and help bring it an audience far beyond the original parent network. A Cinderella-themed ball is held at London's Natural History Museum in August 2015, and Megan receives a Points of Light award from the Prime Minister that year. The endorsement does not prove the underlying medical story, but it transforms the scale on which that story can operate. The financial growth is visible in the charity register. The published record lists gross income of more than £340,000 for the financial year ending in November 2015, compared with tens of thousands in preceding years. The organization is no longer a small gesture sustained by a few families. It has become a significant fundraising operation with public recognition and access to wealthy supporters. That creates a powerful circle of trust. Families trust the charity because other families do. Donors trust it because celebrities do. Celebrities trust it because the charity appears embedded in a community of sick children. Each form of belief reinforces the others. The first detail that did not fit. The pressure intensifies when Jean announces that Meghan urgently needs treatment in the United States. The appeal seeks £120,000 for specialist care, described in later accounts as proton beam radiotherapy. The target is reached with extraordinary speed, reportedly within about 2 days. Speed is central to medical crowdfunding. A family facing a frightening diagnosis may not have months to produce polished explanations, and donors often respond precisely because delay feels dangerous. Yet urgency can also suppress reasonable questions. Asking for more information may be framed as cruelty. Hesitation can look like abandonment. Some parents inside the childhood illness community begin to notice that the appeal is strong on emotional pressure, but weak on verifiable detail. They want to know which hospital will treat Meghan, which consultant is responsible, and why the account of her condition does not match what they recognize from their own children's treatment. These are not abstract demands for paperwork. They are practical questions from people who know what overseas care usually requires. Jean continues to describe Meghan as gravely unwell. Later accounts say supporters are told that oxygen equipment is essential and that the journey itself carries serious risk. The public is being asked to accept not only that Meghan has a tumor, but that her condition has reached a crisis demanding immediate and expensive intervention. At this stage, several explanations remain possible. Medical situations can be confusing. Families may misunderstand terminology. Diagnoses can change. Treatments may be explored and then rejected. A frightened mother may communicate imprecisely. But the questions do not disappear when the fundraising target is reached. They sharpen, because an appeal built on urgency creates an obligation to explain what the money enabled. The journey that raised more questions. The United States trip should have provided clarity. Instead, it produces a new set of contradictions. Parents who have begun comparing notes say they cannot confirm the medical center supposedly providing treatment. Messages about Meghan's condition remain dramatic, but specific information is limited. One account says that after a short period in the United States, supporters are told the tumor has grown and surgery is too dangerous. Meghan and Jean will return home. The route home becomes important. Parents suspicious of the story hire a private investigator. Photographs reportedly show Meghan and Jean leaving a cruise liner with luggage, but without the oxygen equipment supporters had been led to expect. Other digital checking places, communications at a luxury resort near Disney World, rather than creating a clear trail of intensive hospital treatment. A photograph cannot establish a person's full medical condition. Someone may be ill without appearing so in a single frame. Oxygen may be stored out of view. A patient can move between treatment and leisure. Responsible analysis has to preserve those possibilities. The problem is cumulative. The photographs do not stand alone. They sit beside the absence of clear hospital details, changing medical descriptions, the scale of the appeal, and claims about equipment that should have been obvious during travel. Each detail may have an innocent explanation. Together, they make the original account harder to accept without documentation. The parents asking questions are also taking a risk. Believe in Magic has helped real children. It has devoted supporters. Publicly challenging a charity associated with terminal illness can make a critic appear vindictive, jealous, or indifferent to suffering. The easiest response is to remain silent. A small group chooses not to. The first organized concern. Joanna Ashcroft and Nick Bird are among the parents who push for answers. Their authority comes from painful experience. Both are connected to children with cancer, and they know the community in which Believe in Magic operates. They are not professional fraud investigators. They are parents who believe the factual gaps have become too large to ignore. Their work develops through private discussion, shared records, screenshots, travel information, and attempts to test the medical story against observable facts. A Facebook group focused on Megan and Jean becomes a place where doubts are collected. That group also becomes divisive. Supporters see an attack on two people associated with acts of generosity. Critics see a necessary attempt to protect donors and vulnerable families. This conflict matters because the charity's good work is not imaginary. The official inquiry will later acknowledge evidence of substantial spending within the charity's objects. Children did receive experiences, gifts, and events. The existence of genuine charitable activity makes the larger picture more difficult, not less. A scheme does not have to be wholly fictitious to contain serious deception or mismanagement. The parents' concern gradually moves beyond whether Megan's personal appeal is accurate. They begin asking whether charity funds are being governed properly, whether money is passing through personal accounts, and whether trustees can provide records showing where donations went. That is the point at which a private argument becomes a regulatory question. The search for an explanation. A regulator does not need to determine whether every rumor is true before examining basic governance. Registered charities have duties, file accounts, maintain records, manage conflicts, control access to funds, and cooperate with lawful inquiries. Those obligations exist precisely because donors cannot personally audit every emotional appeal. The Charity Commission first handles concerns through a compliance case. It seeks access to books and records, and attempts to meet the trustees. When the required cooperation does not arrive, a statutory inquiry opens in February 2017. Its remit includes late accounts, possible private benefit, the charity's operation for public benefit, conflicts of interest, and whether trustees have responsibly managed resources. This is an important distinction. The inquiry is not initially a medical tribunal deciding whether Megan is ill, nor is it a criminal court determining fraud. It is examining whether the organization entrusted with donations has been managed lawfully and transparently. The trustees' structure immediately raises concerns. The official report says the 4 trustees are closely related. 3 appear on the bank mandate. Yet the arrangement allows one signature to control unlimited charity funds. 2 trustees cannot be contacted despite repeated efforts. And the trustees who do attend a meeting decline to provide the others' contact details, saying they fear those individuals will be exposed to abuse. The inquiry therefore confronts 2 linked problems: incomplete financial records and an organization that cannot demonstrate effective independent oversight. The story's fairy tale language has reached the point where ordinary governance becomes decisive. The money trail that could not be reconstructed. Banking information gives the inquiry a scale against which the missing records can be measured. Its later analysis identifies income of more than £445,000 and expenditure of more than £393,000 for the financial year ending in November 2015. The required accounts arrive late and without the independent examination financial rules required. The movement of money is more troubling. Between December 2015 and May 2016, more than £108,000 is electronically transferred to accounts in the name of a trustee. Cash withdrawals total £133,000 in one financial year and £156,000 in the next. The trustees explained that the charity's account did not provide a suitable debit card, so cash and personal accounts were sometimes used to pay legitimate expenses. That explanation is not impossible. Small organizations can have poor systems without every payment being dishonest. Records are what separate an awkward process from unaccountable spending. The inquiry asks for evidence supporting a sample worth more than £381,000. Receipts and information account for roughly £234,000. The documentation also shows considerable spending on valid charitable purposes. Yet the remaining gap is too large for the regulator to reconstruct confidently. The Commission concludes that large cash withdrawals, the mixing of personal and charitable funds, and poor record-keeping make it impossible to determine whether all money was used for the charity's objects. It finds misconduct or mismanagement by the trustees. It freezes the bank account, orders fundraising to stop, and shares information with police. The police investigate the unexplained expenditure, but do not proceed because the evidence is insufficient. The official finding is serious, but narrower than the internet version. It does not establish that every unexplained pound was stolen. It establishes that the trustees failed to create the audit trail needed to show where the money went. The day the story changed shape. On March 28, 2018, Megan Bhari dies at the National Hospital for Neurology and Neurosurgery. She is 23. The cause recorded in later official safeguarding material is heart failure associated with a fatty liver. Other accounts of the inquest describe acute cardiac arrhythmia due to fatty liver disease. The post-mortem examination finds no brain tumor. The safeguarding review states that Megan's brain was normal and records the coroner's conclusion that there was no evidence of the range of physical illness that had been presented. That finding does not simply disprove one fundraising claim. It changes the moral center of the story. Until then, the public controversy can be understood mainly as a charity scandal, a questionable illness narrative, opaque finances, and parents who forced regulators to look closer. Megan can easily be cast as a willing architect of the deception. Her medical records complicate that judgment. Accounts of the inquest and later review describe high use of liquid morphine, attempts to obtain opiates through false or forged documentation, frequent movement between doctors, missed appointments, and fragmented contact across private and public health care. The official safeguarding review also records concerns from several organizations about possible fabricated or induced illness. The evidence does not provide a single, complete reconstruction of Megan's private life. It does not show precisely when she understood that the tumor story was false, how much control she exercised, or whether dependence, coercion, learned behavior, or a desire for attention shaped her actions. What it does establish is that the young woman at the center of the charity cannot be understood only through the word con. When the public story broke open, Believe in Magic is eventually wound up and removed from the charity register in August 2020. Remaining funds are transferred to another Children's Wish charity. 2 trustees who failed to engage are removed, and the remaining trustee gives a voluntary undertaking not to serve as a trustee or senior charity manager for 5 years. The regulatory report gives the public a documented account of financial mismanagement, but it does not resolve the medical questions surrounding Megan. Those questions later become the subject of a long-form audio investigation, and, in 2026, the 3-part television series titled The Mother of All Cons. The newer series brings forward voices, including Megan's half-sister Nina, and parents involved in challenging the charity. The title is deliberately blunt, yet the deeper story resists a simple division between con artists and victims. Families received genuine help. Donors were given claims that could not be reconciled with later medical findings. Trustees failed in their legal responsibilities. Megan participated publicly in the charity and its appeals, but she had also spent much of adolescence within an illness identity closely managed by her mother. Public attention tends to reward clean roles. A mastermind is easier to understand than a dependent adult whose agency may have been damaged over years. A stolen sum is easier to narrate than hundreds of cash movements without adequate records. A false diagnosis is easier to grasp than a healthcare system in which no single professional can see the whole pattern. The official review eventually focus on that fragmentation, the possibility of fabricated or induced illness. Fabricated or induced illness, often shortened to FII, is the modern term for behavior once commonly called Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Health guidance describes it as a form of abuse in which a parent or carer exaggerates, invents, or deliberately causes illness in another person, exposing them to unnecessary treatment, tests, medication, and an identity organized around sickness. No formal diagnosis of FII was made in Megan's case. That limit is essential. The Safeguarding Review does not clinically diagnose Jean O'Brien, and no criminal court has found that she induced illness or caused Megan's death. The review instead says that the presentation and the coroner's conclusions led the professionals involved to consider FII likely. Jean has rejected the suggestion that she harmed her daughter. In a response reported during the renewed investigation, she said she loved and cared for Megan and regarded the accusation as sickening. She has also maintained that Megan had a pituitary microadenoma, a small non-cancerous tumor. That claim must be set beside the post-mortem finding described by the review and inquest accounts. The distinction between diagnosis and safeguarding analysis matters. The review asks how systems responded to risk. It can identify patterns, missed opportunities, and structural weaknesses without assigning criminal guilt. Its job is not to deliver a verdict on a living person. Within that boundary, the review presents a disturbing possibility. Megan may have entered adulthood carrying an illness identity shaped during childhood, with medication use, medical dependence, and her relationship with her mother, making autonomous choices difficult to assess. If so, treating her simply as an adult who could consent or refuse services may have missed the history that made those decisions possible. The system that saw pieces instead of a pattern. The Safeguarding Review uses the anonymized name, Ella, but its findings align with the publicly reported facts of Megan's case. It examines how professionals across health, social care, and safeguarding handled a young adult presenting to multiple services with serious claimed conditions and concerns about opiate access. Its first conclusion is stark: adult safeguarding professionals lacked guidance and training on fabricated or induced illness in young adults. Health professionals also lacked a consistent framework. Good information sharing could happen, but often depended on individual initiative rather than a reliable system. The transition from childhood to adulthood is crucial. Child safeguarding practice is designed to ask whether a caregiver may be creating or amplifying illness. Adult practice usually begins from autonomy and capacity. A young adult may be legally able to make decisions while still living within coercive control, dependence, or beliefs formed through years of medicalization. The review identifies further barriers. When a patient changes general practitioner, the former doctor may no longer feel able to access or share information. Private doctors may lack access to centralized NHS records. Incidents involving suspected fraudulent attempts to obtain opiates may remain isolated within separate organizations. Each service can therefore see a plausible fragment without seeing the cumulative pattern. This is where the case becomes larger than one disputed family relationship. The system was not missing a single magical database entry that would have solved everything. It lacked a dependable method for combining weak signals across boundaries while respecting privacy, autonomy, and due process. A headache can be real. A diagnosis can be misunderstood. A patient can change doctors for legitimate reasons. A caregiver can be forceful without being abusive. The challenge is recognizing when those individually ordinary facts form a pattern of harm, what the official outcomes did and did not decide. The charity outcome is clear. The regulator found misconduct or mismanagement, failures to file proper accounts, inadequate cooperation, poor financial controls, and records too incomplete to establish that all funds were used correctly. The charity ceased operating and was removed from the register. The criminal outcome is narrower. Police examined the unexplained expenditure and did not proceed because of insufficient evidence. That is not a finding that the finances were properly managed, nor is it proof that a particular person stole money. It means the evidence did not support further criminal action. The medical outcome is also bounded. Megan did not have the brain tumor described in the public fundraising story, according to the post-mortem evidence summarized by the Safeguarding Review. Her death was attributed to heart failure associated with fatty liver disease, not the claimed tumor. What remains unresolved is responsibility. The public record does not establish exactly how the false medical narrative began, which statements came from Meghan, which were directed by Jean, or how Meghan's own understanding developed. It does not establish a criminal link between Jean and Meghan's death. It does not provide a complete accounting for every undocumented payment. That lack of a total answer can feel unsatisfactory. It is also the honest position. The evidence can establish multiple serious failures without proving every allegation that gathered around them. Meghan, as both participant and possible victim. Nina, Meghan's older half-sister, has argued that Meghan should not be remembered as the sole mastermind of an elaborate scheme. Her account describes a child and later young adult whose mother managed her closely, infantilized her, and helped construct the illness identity around which both the charity and Meghan's public life revolved. Nina believes her sister needed protection. That interpretation does not erase Meghan's participation. She appeared publicly, accepted recognition, and occupied the central role in fundraising narratives that were false. People who donated or defended the charity are entitled to feel deceived. But agency is not always all or nothing. A person can repeat untrue claims and still be under coercive influence. Someone raised inside a medical story may help sustain it because the story organizes family attachment, identity, status, medication, and access to a wider world. An adult may make choices, while those choices remain heavily conditioned by dependence. The Safeguarding Review's language about possible childhood abuse and its legacy in adulthood is important for precisely this reason. It warns that professionals risk double victimization when they see only an adult's apparent decisions and fail to consider how earlier coercion may have shaped them. Meghan, therefore, occupies the hardest position in the case. She may have been both a face of deception and a person harmed by the system of deception around her. The available evidence does not allow those identities to be cleanly separated. Why the parents' questions mattered. The parents who challenged belief in magic were not proved correct about every suspicion. They did, however, identify contradictions that formal systems had not yet assembled. Their persistence contributed to scrutiny of an organization handling large sums and operating among unusually vulnerable families. Their role exposes a difficult truth about online communities. Trust is necessary for mutual support, but trust can become a shield against verification. Members may defend a figure because that person once helped them, because criticism feels disloyal, or because accepting deception would contaminate meaningful memories. Celebrity endorsement amplifies the same mechanism. Famous supporters can increase donations and create extraordinary experiences, but their presence is not due diligence. They may be relying on the same emotional story as everyone else. The larger the endorsement becomes, the harder it can be for an ordinary parent to ask a basic question without appearing malicious. Crowdfunding adds urgency and removes institutional friction. That can save time for genuine families. It can also allow a persuasive account to raise a life-changing sum before medical claims are independently checked. The answer is not to treat every ill person as a suspect. It is to normalize proportionate verification when appeals seek large sums for specific treatment. The parents' most important contribution was not proving a complete theory. It was refusing to let compassion mean that questions were forbidden. Why the promise still matters. Believe in Magic's original promise was not empty. Children attended parties, received gifts, traveled, and experienced moments their families still valued. The regulator found evidence of considerable expenditure within the charity's purposes, even while concluding that the overall financial controls were unacceptable. Both facts belong in the same account. That coexistence is what makes the story so instructive. Serious wrongdoing does not always hide behind a wholly fake institution. It can grow inside something that also produces genuine good. A persuasive medical narrative can be false, even when the emotions around it are real. A young woman can help tell the story and still have been harmed by it. The deepest institutional lesson concerns fragments. One doctor sees headaches. Another sees a request for medication. A private clinic sees a new patient. A charity regulator sees missing accounts. Parents see contradictions online. Police see a financial file that does not meet the criminal threshold. No single fragment explains the whole. The Safeguarding Review asks systems to become better at recognizing that pattern, especially when a child becomes an adult without becoming free from the relationship that shaped the illness narrative. Its findings are not a retrospective conviction. They are a warning about the spaces between services. The bracelet at the beginning of this story still represents something worth protecting: the belief that strangers can ease the lives of seriously ill children. Protecting that belief requires more than generosity. It requires records, independent trustees, medical clarity, information sharing, and the freedom to ask questions before a promise becomes too powerful to examine.